Imagine you're sitting on a jumbo jet buckled in, the engines roaring beneath your feet, ready to take off for a sunny vacation. But within minutes, your flight collides with another massive 747 in thick fog, and hundreds of lives are lost in a fireball that becomes the deadliest crash in aviation history. Today, we're diving into the terrifying true story of the Tenerife Airport Disaster, a day that forever changed aviation safety. And before we begin, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories like this. It was March 27, 1977. Tenerife, the largest of Spain's Canary Islands, is usually known for its beaches, warm sunshine, and vacationers flying in from Europe and America. But that Sunday would become infamous. At the small Los Rodeos airport, now called Tenerife North Airport, an unusual and tragic chain of events unfolded. Why was the airport so unusually busy? That morning, a bomb had exploded at Gran Canaria Airport, the main destination for many flights. The attack forced authorities to shut down Gran Canaria temporarily. Flights scheduled to land there, including two giant Boeing 747s, were diverted to Los Rodeos, a much smaller airport not designed to handle so many large aircraft at once. The two flights in question were KLM Flight 4805 coming from Amsterdam, packed with Dutch tourists, and Pan Am Flight 1736, a chartered flight from New York, full of Americans and international travelers. Both were among the largest passenger jets in the world at the time. And now, they were parked at a cramped airport that was straining to handle them. The situation worsened as the weather changed. A thick, rolling fog crept across the airfield, blanketing the runways. Visibility dropped to just a few hundred feet. Pilots couldn't see each other. The air traffic control tower couldn't see the runways. And Los Rodeos had no ground radar. That meant the controller had no way of tracking planes once they disappeared into the mist. Think about that for a second. Two massive 747s, each weighing over 300 tons, moving blind in the fog on the same runway. On board KLM 4805 was Captain Jacob Veldhuizen van Zanten, a name that would become infamous. He wasn't just any pilot. He was KLM's chief training captain, one of their most experienced aviators, and he was even the face of their ads. Dutch travelers trusted him. Alongside him were First Officer Klaas Meurs and Flight Engineer Willem Schroeder. Behind them sat 248 passengers and crew, mostly Dutch holidaymakers, excited for a getaway to the Canary Islands. But Van Zanten was also under pressure. Dutch aviation law strictly limited pilot duty hours. If the delay dragged on, the crew might time out and be forced to stay overnight. The captain wanted to get airborne, fast. Meanwhile, Pan Am 1736, named Clipper Victor, carried 396 souls, mostly Americans, including families, retirees, and a group heading to a cruise. Its captain, Victor Grubbs, and First Officer Robert Bragg were experienced, calm, and cautious. They were waiting patiently for instructions from the control tower, but they faced their own challenge. The crowded taxiways were blocked with parked planes. To reach the runway, Pan Am had to backtrack on the runway itself, the same strip of tarmac KLM would later use for takeoff. Here's where the nightmare began. The tower instructed KLM to taxi to the end of the runway, turn around, and wait for clearance to take off. Pan Am was told to taxi along the runway and exit at the third exit to clear the path. Simple enough, right? Except, the fog made it nearly impossible for Pan Am's crew to spot the exits. They missed the third one and were still on the runway when KLM turned around at the end. Then came the radio chaos. KLM's captain, eager to leave, pushed the throttles forward, starting his takeoff roll. The tower had not actually cleared them for takeoff, only to stand by. But a simultaneous radio call from Pan Am reporting that they were still taxiing created a radio heterodyne, a garbled overlap that made messages unintelligible. The KLM crew never clearly heard Pan Am's warning. Flight engineer Schroeder asked, "Is Pan Am clear of the runway?" Van Zanten answered firmly, "Yes." But Pan Am wasn't. They were still rolling right down the same strip. Imagine the scene. KLM 747 thunders down the runway, engines screaming, accelerating to nearly 160 miles. Out of the fog, the dark silhouette of another jumbo jet suddenly appears. Pan Am, directly in their path. Van Zanten yanked back on the controls, trying to leapfrog over the Pan Am. For a split second, the giant aircraft actually lifted off the ground, but it was too late. The underside of the KLM jet slammed into Pan Am's fuselage. Its landing gear ripped through the cabin roof. Its engines tore through the upper deck. A fireball engulfed the tarmac. KLM crashed back down and exploded, killing everyone on board instantly. 248 lives lost in seconds. Pan Am's jet was shredded and set ablaze. Passengers and crew scrambled desperately through the wreckage. Some managed to survive, but 335 people perished. Only 61 made it out alive, most of them seated in the very front of the aircraft. In total, 583 people killed. The deadliest accident in aviation history. Among the survivors was Pan Am's first officer Robert Bragg. He later described the moment of impact. The whole airplane shook violently. Then we heard explosions and fire immediately broke out. Flight attendant Dorothy Kelly became a hero that day. Despite her injuries, she helped passengers escape through the wreckage, guiding them into the fog and away from the flames. Many owed their lives to her courage. One passenger recalled crawling through twisted metal, blinded by smoke, hearing only screams and explosions. For them, survival was pure luck, where they sat determined whether they lived or died. The world was horrified. How could two modern airliners collide on the ground? Investigators identified several key causes: miscommunication, KLM's captain mistakenly believing he was cleared for takeoff, Pan Am's critical transmission being blocked, thick fog making visual confirmation impossible, Los Rodeos' lack of ground radar and poor signage, and the KLM captain's rush to meet duty hours. But most damning was the breakdown of cockpit authority. In those days, junior crew rarely challenged their captain. KLM's first officer and flight engineer both hesitated, even when they weren't certain Pan Am was clear. That silence cost hundreds of lives. If there was any silver lining, it was that the Tenerife tragedy transformed aviation safety worldwide. Clearer communication rules were established. The word takeoff is now used only when giving or acknowledging actual clearance. Crew resource management training began, teaching pilots to challenge decisions and work as a team. Ground radar became standard at major airports, and stricter rules were introduced to prevent aircraft from entering or crossing runways without explicit clearance. In short, the lessons learned from Tenerife have made flying far safer today. For the families of those 583 victims, the scars remain. Towns across the Netherlands mourned entire families lost. In the United States, grieving relatives demanded changes to ensure such a disaster never happened again. Every time we board a plane now, buckle our seatbelt, listen to the safety briefing, and trust that the skies are safe. We owe some of that safety to the painful lessons of Tenerife. So, that's the haunting story of the Tenerife Airport Disaster, the deadliest crash in aviation history. A tragedy born from fog, pressure, and miscommunication, but one that forced the aviation world to change for the better. If you found this story gripping, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into history's most shocking events. And tell us in the comments, would you have the courage to fly again after surviving something like this?